I was 17 years old when my father looked me in the eyes in our cramped kitchen and said the words that would alter the trajectory of my entire life: "You don't deserve to carry my last name. If you keep going down this path, I will disown you. You're no daughter of mine." The words hung in the air like a death sentence, heavy and suffocating. The kitchen, which had always felt small and safe, suddenly felt like a cage. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across my father's face. His hands, calloused from years of working at the auto repair shop he had built from nothing, were clenched into fists on the worn wooden table. His eyes, usually warm when he looked at my younger sister, were cold and hard as they fixed on me. My mother, Rosa, stood frozen by the sink, a dish towel clutched in her hands, her face pale with shock. My younger sister, Elena, was in the doorway, her eyes wide with fear. The silence was absolute, broken only by the ticking of the old clock on the wall and the distant hum of traffic from the street outside. "You can't mean that, Papa," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I'm your daughter. I've always been your daughter." "You were," he said, his voice like gravel. "Until you decided to throw your life away on this nonsense. Music? Performing? You think that's what a Harlan does? We work with our hands. We build things that matter. We don't chase fantasies like some entitled child who doesn't understand the value of real work." The words cut deeper than any physical wound. I had grown up in that shop, watching my father work on cars, his hands always covered in grease, his back always bent over engines that needed fixing. He had taught me the names of tools before I could read, had shown me how to change a tire when I was 10, had expected me to follow in his footsteps. But I had never loved engines the way he did. I had never felt the same satisfaction in fixing a broken carburetor or replacing a worn-out transmission. What I loved was music. The way a song could capture a feeling so perfectly that it made you feel seen. The way a melody could transport you to another world. The way lyrics could say what words alone could not. I had taught myself guitar at 12, using an old acoustic I had found at a yard sale. The strings were rusty and the wood was scratched, but it was mine. I had spent hours in my room, learning chords, writing songs, dreaming of a life beyond the county line. I had played at local open mics, uploaded covers online, and slowly, a small following had begun to form. But my father saw none of that. He saw a daughter who was wasting her potential. He saw a girl who was rejecting the life he had worked so hard to build. He saw a betrayal. "I got into the music program at the college in Nashville," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's a good school. I have a partial scholarship. I can work to pay for the rest." You need to come to your senses," he interrupted, slamming his hand on the table. "You need to stop this foolishness and think about what you're throwing away. I built this business for you. For your future. And you want to throw it away for a pipe dream?" "It's not a pipe dream," I said, my voice rising despite myself. "It's what I love. It's who I am. I don't want to spend my life in a repair shop, fixing cars for people who don't appreciate it. I want to create something. I want to connect with people. You want to disgrace this family," he said coldly. "You want to make a fool of yourself and drag our name through the mud. I won't allow it. I won't have people saying that Richard Harlan's daughter is some musician. Some performer. That's not how we live. That's not who we are." I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I had learned long ago that crying wouldn't change his mind. It would only make him angrier, more determined to prove that he was right. "Papa, please," my mother interjected, her voice trembling. She's just a girl. She has dreams. Maybe we could. No, my father said, cutting her off. I won't have this. I won't have her throwing away everything we've worked for because she thinks she's too good for this life. If she wants to go, she can go. But she won't do it with my name. She won't do it with my support. She will be dead to me. The words echoed in the silence that followed. I looked at my father, searching his face for any sign of softening, any hint that he didn't mean what he was saying. But there was nothing. He had made up his mind. My mother's face crumpled. She started to cry, the dish towel falling from her hands. Elena, my sister, began to sob quietly. I stood there, frozen, feeling the life I had known crumbling around me. Fine, I said, my voice hollow. If that's how you feel, then I'll go. I'll become someone else. Someone you don't have to be ashamed of. I walked out of the kitchen and up to my room. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I walked slowly, deliberately, each step carrying me further away from the life I had known. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything I was leaving behind. My childhood bedroom, with its posters and piles of notebooks. The house where I had grown up, with its familiar smells and sounds. The family I had once thought would always be there. But I also thought about the music. The songs I had written, the ones that were still inside me, waiting to be born. I thought about the life I could have, the person I could become, if I was brave enough to walk away. At dawn, I packed a duffel bag with clothes, my guitar, and the $340 I had saved from working at a diner after school. I left my phone on the nightstand. I didn't want them to be able to reach me. I wrote a note and left it on the kitchen table. I'm becoming exactly who I need to be. I don't need your name. I'll make my own. I walked out the front door before anyone woke up. The sun was just beginning to rise over the rooftops, casting long shadows across the street. I didn't look back. The first few months were a blur of survival. I had a friend, Chloe, whose older sister lived in a tiny apartment in Columbus. She let me crash on her couch for a few weeks while I figured things out. I got a job at a coffee shop, working the early morning shift, and started playing at open mics in the evenings. But the life was hard. The couch was uncomfortable, the hours were long, and the tips were meager. I ate cheap food, skipped meals when I had to, and spent every spare dollar on recording equipment and bus fare to auditions. The rejection was constant. Producers told me my voice was too raw. Club owners said my songs were too sad. Fellow musicians looked at me with pity, seeing another starry-eyed girl who would eventually give up and go home. But I didn't give up. I couldn't. Every time I thought about quitting, I would hear my father's voice in my head, "You're no daughter of mine." And I would pick up my guitar and play. I legally changed my name to Maya Vale when I turned 18. I chose Vale because it meant strong and worthy, and because I wanted to rise from the valleys of my past. The process was simple but symbolic. The new name felt like armor, like a shield against the pain of rejection. My father never reached out. Not on my birthday, not during holidays, not even when my mother mentioned that she had seen my name on a local poster for a small show. The silence was deafening, but it was also freeing. It meant I had no one to disappoint, no one to answer to, no one to hold me back. Years passed. The grind continued. I worked construction during the day, lifting heavy materials and earning just enough to survive. I played at bars and clubs at night, singing for indifferent crowds who talked over my music. I toured in a beat-up van with unreliable bandmates, sleeping on floors and dealing with shady promoters who promised everything and delivered nothing. But I also wrote. I wrote about rejection and loneliness, about forging your own identity, about turning pain into power. I wrote about the daughter who was no longer a daughter, the girl who had to become someone else entirely. The songs were raw and honest, and they came from a place of deep truth. One of those songs, Broken Name, started to gain attention. It was about changing your identity, about shedding the expectations of others and becoming who you were meant to be. Someone uploaded it to a streaming platform, and it started to spread. Local radio stations picked it up. Bloggers wrote about it. People commented on the video, saying the song had given them courage to leave toxic situations. The momentum was slow at first, but it built. I signed with a small indie label, released my first EP, and started touring more seriously. The crowds grew from a handful of people to dozens, then hundreds. The fame grew steadily. Marcus Vale, the name I had chosen for myself, started appearing on festival lineups, in magazines, and on radio stations across the country. I headlined small arenas. I won regional awards. I was no longer just a girl with a guitar, I was an artist with a following. But the success was also a reminder of what I had lost. When I played a sold-out show, I would sometimes scan the crowd, looking for familiar faces. I never saw my father. I never saw my mother. I saw fans who had become like family, people who had found meaning in my music. But my biological family was absent. The void was always there, a quiet ache in my chest that never fully went away. It was my mother who reached out first, 5 years after I had left. I had just released my second album, the one that would make me a multi-platinum artist. My father had seen me on television, and he was struggling with the reality of who I had become. My mother and I exchanged a few messages, tentative, cautious, and eventually, we agreed to meet. The meeting was in a quiet cafe, neutral territory. I arrived early, ordering a coffee I couldn't drink, my hands shaking. When they walked in, I barely recognized them. My father looked older, smaller, diminished. His hair had gone gray. His posture was hunched. My mother looked the same, but there was a sadness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Marcus, my father said, using my new name awkwardly. We saw the Grammy performance. The song about the name. I sat down calmly. You told me I didn't deserve the Harlan name. So I made a better one. And I made it famous. Tears filled his eyes. I was angry. I was scared you'd fail. I thought I was pushing you to be strong. But you weren't pushing me to be strong, I said. You were pushing me away. You were telling me that I wasn't enough, that my dreams weren't worthy, that the person I was becoming was someone you couldn't love. The silence that followed was heavy with regret. My mother reached across the table to take my hand. We should have been better. We should have supported you. We were wrong. I didn't pull away. I'm glad you're here. But you can't undo what happened. You can't make up for the years of silence, the years when I was fighting alone. I know, my father said, his voice breaking. I know I can't take it back. But I want to know you. I want to be part of your life, even if it's just a small part. The conversation was long and difficult. We talked about the past, about the things that had been said and left unsaid. My father admitted his fear of losing me to a life he didn't understand. My mother confessed her guilt for not intervening. I told them about the years of struggle, the nights of loneliness, the moment I had given up on ever hearing from them again. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a beginning. Let me take you deeper into those early years so you understand the full weight of what I carried. After I left home, the silence from my family was absolute. No calls on birthdays. No support when my car broke down 300 miles from home, leaving me stranded with no money. No contact whatsoever. It was as if I had disappeared, as if I had never existed. The loneliness was crushing. I had friends, but none who truly understood the depth of my isolation. They had families who called them on holidays, who sent care packages, who showed up to support them. I had no one. Holidays were the hardest. I would see photos on social media of family gatherings where I was never tagged. I would hear about celebrations I was never invited to. I spent Christmas alone in my apartment more than once, eating takeout and writing songs. The rejection from the music industry was relentless. Producers told me my style was too raw. Club owners said my songs were too sad. One agent told me that my story, a disowned daughter who had changed her name, was too depressing to market. He suggested I change my image, become more upbeat, more palatable. I refused. My music was who I was. If I changed it, I would be betraying myself. I faced near bankruptcy twice. The money from my EP had run out, and I was struggling to pay for recording costs. I had to choose between paying rent or buying new strings. I chose the strings and wrote songs about the hunger. There were nights I questioned everything. I would lie awake in my van, cold and tired, wondering if my father had been right after all. Maybe I was chasing a fantasy. Maybe I should have stayed, become a mechanic, lived a quiet life. Maybe the pain of rejection wasn't worth it. But then I would remember the music. The songs I had written, the ones that were still inside me, waiting to be born. I would pick up my guitar, and the notes would start to flow, and I would remember why I had left. One of the songs I wrote during that period was Veil Rising. It was about a girl who had been told she wasn't enough, who had been rejected and cast aside, and who had risen anyway. It became an anthem for people who had been told they couldn't succeed, who had been disowned by their families, who had to forge their own identity. The song was raw and personal, and it was real. When I recorded it, I put everything into it, the loneliness, the pain, the determination. It was the most honest piece of music I had ever created, and it changed everything. The song caught the attention of a major producer who had been looking for something authentic. She reached out, offered to work with me, and together we created the sound that would define my career. The album we made, Veil Rising, became a massive success. My father's words continued to haunt me. They were a constant presence in my life, a reminder of everything I had left behind. But as the success grew, the power of those words began to fade. I had become someone he couldn't have imagined, someone he had tried to prevent from existing. The moment I realized that my name was known globally was a surreal experience. I was walking through an airport in Paris when I heard someone humming my song. I turned, and saw a woman with headphones on, mouthing the lyrics. She had no idea I was standing there, no idea that the artist she was listening to was right next to her. I didn't say anything. I just smiled to myself and kept walking. The fame grew, but it wasn't the most important part of my journey. What mattered was the impact my music had on others. Fans would write to me, saying that my songs had given them the courage to leave toxic situations, to pursue their dreams, to become who they were meant to be. One young girl from a small town like mine told me that Veil Rising had saved her life. She had been ready to give up, and my music had given her a reason to keep going. That was when I realized that my voice mattered. Not just for my own survival, but for the survival of others. The relationship with my family continued to evolve slowly. My mother became a regular presence in my life, visiting when she could, always eager to hear about my latest project. My father was more tentative, but he started attending some of my shows, sitting in the back row, quiet and proud. It took time, years of small steps and careful conversations, but eventually, we began to heal. I hosted a private dinner for my family in my home, a beautiful house with a recording studio and a garden. My mother cried when she saw it. My father said little, but I could see the emotion in his eyes. My sister, Elena, who had always been caught in the middle, reached out and we reconnected. She was attending college, studying something practical, marketing, but she had also started singing, and she would call me for advice. Our relationship was cautious at first, but it grew into genuine sisterhood. Over the years, I also began to understand my father's perspective. He had grown up poor, the son of an immigrant who had worked himself to death in a factory. He had built his business from nothing, had sacrificed everything to give us a better life. His fear of me failing was really a fear of seeing me struggle the way he had struggled. But that understanding didn't excuse what he had done. He had tried to erase me, to control me, to mold me into something I wasn't. And I had to protect myself. I thought about what it meant to be disowned by your own family. The word carried so much weight, so much history. It was a legal term, but it was also an emotional one. It meant being cut off, abandoned, rejected by the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally. For years, I carried that word like a scar. It was a constant reminder of what I had lost, of who I wasn't. But I also used it as fuel. I transformed the word into motivation, and then into art. I wrote songs about being disowned, about being rejected, about finding your own identity. I performed those songs on stages across the world, and I watched as they connected with audiences who had faced similar struggles. The pain of my father's rejection would never fully disappear. It was a part of me now, a part of my story. But it was no longer the defining part. I had become someone stronger than the girl who had stood in that kitchen, crying and pleading. My father's words had been meant to break me. Instead, they had helped me build something unbreakable. In the years that followed, the success continued. The album went platinum. I won multiple Grammy Awards. I headlined stadium tours. My name, the one I had chosen for myself, became known around the world. But the money and fame were never the most important parts. What mattered was that I had created a life that I was proud of. I had helped others. I had left a mark on the world. I had taken the pain of rejection and transformed it into something beautiful. The name I had chosen, Vale, had become a symbol of resilience. When people heard it, they thought of strength. They thought of someone who had risen from nothing, who had faced incredible odds and refused to give up. They didn't think of a girl who had been disowned by her father. They thought of an artist who had found her voice. And that, ultimately, was the greatest revenge of all. But the process of healing wasn't linear. There were moments of regression, moments when the old wounds would open again. I would hear a song on the radio that reminded me of my father. I would see a family celebrating together and feel a pang of jealousy. I would lie awake at night, wondering if I had made the right decision in walking away. Therapy helped. I worked with a therapist who specialized in family trauma, who understood the complexities of rejection and disownment. I learned to process the anger and sadness, to understand my father's actions as a product of his own upbringing. I learned to forgive myself for the guilt I felt. But forgiveness was a choice I had to make every single day. It wasn't a destination. It was a practice. In my music, I explored the theme of family and identity. My songs became more nuanced, less about the anger of rejection and more about the complexity of healing. I wrote about the small moments of reconnection with my father, the tentative steps toward a new understanding. The album Reckoning was a turning point. It was about confronting the past, about understanding the forces that shaped us, about finding peace with the people who had hurt us. Critics praised its depth and honesty. Fans connected with its themes of forgiveness and growth. I performed Reckoning on a world tour, and I dedicated each show to the people who had been told they weren't enough. It was a healing experience for me, but also for the audiences. Thousands of people would sing along, their faces illuminated by the stage lights, their voices raised in solidarity. I also used my platform to support causes that mattered. I started a foundation for young artists from difficult backgrounds, providing scholarships and mentorship to kids who had been told their dreams didn't matter. I sponsored music programs in underserved schools, giving children the resources to explore their creativity. I became an advocate for mental health awareness, speaking openly about my own struggles. The music business was tough, and I learned that firsthand. There were contracts to navigate, negotiations to manage, and creative battles to fight. I had to stand up for my vision, often against advisors who wanted to mold me into something more marketable. I refused to compromise on the authenticity that had brought me this far. My fans were the core of my success. They were the ones who had found my music on streaming platforms, who had shared it with their friends, who had come to my shows and filled the venues. They had become my family in a way that my biological family never was. I remembered the early days when I had performed to near-empty rooms, singing my heart out to no one in particular. I remembered the nights I had doubted if I would ever make it. Those memories kept me grounded. They reminded me of how far I had come, and how much I had overcome. There were more challenges in the industry. I faced criticism from some who said my story was too dark, too personal. One reviewer wrote that my music was oppressively sad, missing the point entirely. But I knew that the emotions I was expressing were real and valid. I had a responsibility to stay true to myself and my fans. I also had to learn to manage the pressures of fame. The scrutiny of the press, the demands of fans, the endless travel, it was exhausting. I often felt isolated, even in a crowd. But I found ways to cope, including meditation, journaling, and time with close friends who had been with me since the beginning. My relationship with my father continued to evolve. He started attending more events, even if he never sat in the front row. I saw him watching me from the back of the venue, his face proud but pained. We didn't talk often, but when we did, it felt like we were making progress. One night, after a show in my hometown, my father approached me backstage. He had come with my mother, my sister, and a few extended family members. He waited until the crowd had thinned out, then pulled me aside. "You've done something incredible," he said. "I didn't think it was possible. I didn't think you could do this." I was wrong. I nodded, feeling a mix of emotions. "I didn't do it to prove you wrong. I did it because I had to. It was the only way I could survive." "I understand that now," he said. "I wish I had understood it then." We didn't hug. We didn't embrace. We just stood there, two people who had been through so much, trying to find a way forward. But it was a start. The legacy I was building extended beyond the music. I had become a public figure, and with that came a responsibility to use my voice for good. I spoke at universities, sharing my story and encouraging students to pursue their passions. I wrote a memoir, Veil Rising, A Daughter's Journey, which became a bestseller and was eventually optioned for a film. The memoir was a way to process the past, but also to share the lessons I had learned. I wrote about the disownment, the years of struggle, the moment of breakthrough, and the slow process of healing. I wrote about the chosen family I had built, the people who had supported me when no one else would. The response was overwhelming. Readers reached out to share their own stories of rejection and resilience. It was a reminder that I was not alone, that there were others who had faced similar struggles and had emerged stronger. Through it all, I never lost sight of the music. It had saved me, and it continued to sustain me. I kept writing, kept performing, kept creating. Every new song was a chance to connect with someone, to offer them a moment of recognition and hope. I also made a conscious effort to maintain boundaries with my family. I had spent years protecting myself, building walls that kept them at a distance. I didn't trust them fully, and I didn't think I ever would. But I allowed them access to my life on my own terms. My father's health started to decline when I was 31. The years of hard physical labor had taken their toll, and he was diagnosed with a chronic condition that would require ongoing care. My mother called me, her voice trembling, and asked if I would come home. I flew to Ohio the next day. Walking into the hospital room was surreal. My father was in a bed, looking frail and tired. He had lost weight. His hair was thin. He was hooked up to machines that beeped and hummed, tracking the vital signs that had once been so strong. "Marcus," he said, using my new name again. "You came." "Of course I came," I said. "You're my father." The tears that filled his eyes were unexpected. He reached out with a trembling hand, and I took it. "I'm so sorry," he said. "I'm sorry for everything. I should have supported you. I should have believed in you. I was so afraid of losing you that I pushed you away." "I know," I said. "I forgive you." And in that moment, I realized that I meant it. The years of anger, the resentment, the pain, they had finally faded. I had taken the journey of forgiveness, not because he deserved it, but because I deserved the freedom that came with letting go. He passed away 3 months later. I was at his bedside, holding his hand, when he took his last breath. I didn't cry. I didn't sob. I sat there, quiet and calm, feeling the weight of what had happened. The funeral was attended by many. My father had been well liked in the community, a respected mechanic who had helped generations of families with their car troubles. I spoke at the service, sharing memories of the man he had been, the lessons he had taught me, and the complicated love that had existed between us. "We didn't always see eye to eye," I said. "But he was my father. He was the man who taught me to work hard, to be strong, to never give up. And even when we disagreed, even when he hurt me, I never stopped loving him." The words brought tears to many eyes, including my own. It was a moment of closure, a moment of healing. After the funeral, I spent some time with my family. My mother was grieving, but she was also relieved. My sister, Elena, was by my side. We talked about the past, about the future, about all the things we had been through. The house where I had grown up felt smaller now. The shop where my father had spent his life was being sold. The life I had left behind was finally behind me. But I had built something new. I had created a life that was entirely my own, a life that I was proud of. The years after his death were a time of reflection and growth. I continued to write, record, and perform. I expanded my foundation, helping more young artists who faced barriers like the ones I had overcome. I mentored aspiring musicians, offering them the support I had never received. my mother and I grew closer. She visited often, coming to concerts and staying in my guest house. We talked about everything, the past, the present, the future. She apologized for not intervening, for not being stronger. I accepted her apology, understanding that she had been trapped in her own circumstances. Elena pursued a career in music management. She had a natural talent for it, understanding the industry in a way that complemented her creative abilities. We started a small label together, supporting emerging artists who were overlooked by the mainstream. It was a way to give back, to create opportunities for others like us. I also found love. My partner, a woman named Sasha, was a fellow musician who understood the demands of the lifestyle and the importance of independence. We supported each other's careers, finding a balance that worked. She was with me on stage and off, a steady presence in my life. Our home became a sanctuary, filled with music, art, and the laughter of chosen family. We had friends over for dinners, played music late into the night, and supported each other through the ups and downs of life. The first time I performed Veil Rising after my father's death, I cried. Not because I was sad, but because I realized how far I had come. The song was a testament to resilience, a reminder that even the deepest pain could be transformed into something beautiful. I looked out at the crowd, thousands of faces lit by the stage lights, and I felt a wave of gratitude. They had been with me every step of the way. They had bought my albums, streamed my songs, come to my shows. They had become my family. When I walked off stage that night, Sasha was waiting for me. She hugged me tight and whispered, "I'm so proud of you." And in that moment, I felt it. I felt the fulfillment of the journey I had begun years earlier, walking out of my father's house with nothing but a dream and a broken heart. I had built a name, Veil, from nothing. I had made it famous. I had proven that I didn't need anyone else to define my worth. The greatest lesson I learned is this: when a parent tells you that you're not enough, that you don't deserve their name, believe them, and then become someone who doesn't need their validation. The most powerful response to rejection is to build a life so full and successful that their absence becomes their punishment. I think about the 17-year-old girl sometimes, the one who stood in the kitchen and heard her father say, "You're no daughter of mine." I want to tell her that she survived. I want to tell her that she thrived. I want to tell her that the name she chose became a beacon of hope for millions. I want to tell her that the pain was temporary, but the triumph is eternal. My name is Maya Veil. I'm an artist, a survivor, a builder. I was told I didn't deserve my family name, so I created one of my own. I made it known across the world, a symbol of resilience and transformation. I didn't do it to prove my father wrong. I did it to prove myself right. And I would do it all again. The story of Maya Veil is a story of rejection and reinvention, a betrayal and breakthrough. It's a story of a daughter who walked away from everything and built something extraordinary. It's a story of turning pain into power and finding your voice in the silence. If there's one thing I hope people take from my story, it's this: you are enough. You have always been enough. The people who reject you, who tell you you're not worthy, who try to erase you, they are wrong. You have the power to create your own identity, to build a life that reflects who you truly are. The world may not understand you. Your family may not support you. But you can still succeed. You can still build something beautiful. I did. And so can you. 15 years after I walked out that door, I performed in a stadium that held 40,000 people. I looked out at the sea of faces, and I knew I had made it. I had turned the story of my father's rejection into something that moved millions. But it was the small moments that meant the most. The fan who wrote to say my music had saved their life. The young artist who found a scholarship through my foundation. The mother who told me she had finally understood her daughter because of my music. These moments were the true measure of my success. I have never forgotten where I came from. I keep a photo of the small house in Ohio, a reminder of the home I left behind. I have a string from my first guitar, the one I bought at a yard sale, hanging from my studio wall. These objects connect me to my past, to the girl who dared to dream. My story is not just about me. It's about everyone who has been told they can't succeed, who has been rejected by the people who should have loved them, who has had to forge their own identity from scratch. It's a reminder that we all have the power to rise. That power comes from within. No one can give it to you, and no one can take it away. The journey continues. I'm working on a new album now, exploring themes of transformation and renewal. I'm writing new songs, finding new sounds, pushing myself to grow as an artist. The name Vale is known across the world, and it will be remembered long after I'm gone. I've built a legacy, not just of music, but of hope. My father is gone, but his memory lives on. Our relationship, complicated and painful, shaped who I am. I carry the lessons he taught me, even as I've forged my own path. My mother visits frequently, and we've mended the wounds that once divided us. My sister is building her own career, finding her own voice. We are finding a new way to be a family, one built on respect and understanding. The greatest revenge against someone who told you that you don't deserve their name is to become undeniable. To create a life so extraordinary that your success speaks for itself. To rise so high that their absence becomes their punishment. That's my story. A father who said I didn't deserve his last name. A thread of disownment. Years of struggle, doubt, and relentless creation. And a new name, Vale, that now echoes in stadiums around the world. I didn't need his name. I made my own. And it will never be forgotten.